Tensions are rising in the Arctic as Greenland becomes the focus of growing geopolitical anxiety. As NATO allies launch Exercise Arctic Endurance without U.S. participation, Denmark is sending a confusing message. It is about Russia, says Major General Soren Andersen, warning that Moscow could shift military resources from Ukraine to other theaters, including the Arctic, opening a dangerous new front in the high north.
Today we have a very close relationship with the US military, so I will not go into the political side of it. For me, it is about Russia. It is about what's going on in Ukraine. We see how Russia is conducting war in Ukraine. And when the war in Ukraine is over, hopefully with a good result for Ukraine, it is our expectation that Russia will move the resources they have been using in Ukraine on other theaters, and that is also including in the Arctic. That I've been commander up here for 2.5 years. I haven't seen any Russia or Chinese combat ships up here. We see, of course, that China and Russia is working together in the Arctic Ocean. Of course, it's 1,000 nautical miles from here, but we have seen that, and that is a new normal, I will say. So there has been a change for Russia and China in the Arctic Ocean. So we share the concern with US, with Canada and other Arctic states that Russia and China are working together in the Arctic Ocean. And if we are going to defend NATO's northern flank, we simply have to step up. We have to work together. I think there's no immediate threat from Russia right now, so we are looking into a potential threat. So we have time to step up, but we simply also have to do it. We are conducting an exercise up here called Arctic Endurance. It is an exercise that will be running over or throughout the 2026 and also maybe next year as well, where we increased our presence here in and around Greenland. And we do that with Danish troops, but also with allied troops. And for the moment we have Danish army troops up here, and we have French commandos up here.
Like the rest of the world, we have been following the situation around Greenland, and note that the situation is quite contradictory. We proceed from the assumption that Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. We have heard statements from Denmark and Greenland that Greenland isn't up for sale, and we also heard statements from Washington that it's formulating offers to purchase Greenland in some form.
The Kremlin says it is watching closely. As NATO forces land on the frozen terrain of Greenland, Russia is calling the situation extraordinary, warning that the Arctic is fast becoming the next global flashpoint. European allies are deploying troops to the self-governing Danish territory in a show of unity not against Moscow, but against something far more disruptive: U.S. President Donald Trump's push to bring Greenland under U.S. control. For Russia, the message is unmistakable. The Kremlin has dismissed Trump's claim that Moscow or Beijing would eventually seize Greenland if Washington does not act. Instead, Russian officials accuse NATO of provocation and promise a response. Moscow says it will strengthen its defense capabilities and expand Arctic infrastructure, signaling that any shift in the region's balance of power will not go unanswered. This situation is unusual, even extraordinary, from the standpoint of international law, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said. He suggested Trump views international law as irrelevant, warning that the world is now moving along another trajectory.
The situation is unusual, I would even say extraordinary from the point of view of international law. But on the other hand, President Trump himself has said that international law isn't a priority substance for him. And so the situation is developing on some other trajectory, and we will be watching, along with the rest of the world, which trajectory.
At stake is more than an island. Greenland sits at the crossroads of missile early warning systems, Arctic sea routes opening due to melting ice, and vast untapped reserves of rare earths, oil and gas. Trump argues U.S. control is vital to national security and insists NATO would ultimately benefit. But the dispute is shaking the alliance itself. The White House has refused to rule out military action, pressing Denmark to cede the territory despite repeated rejections from Greenland's own leaders. That pressure threatens to fracture NATO, which is a strategic gift for Russia as it battles the West over Ukraine and Europe's future. NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte says Arctic security is now a top priority. 7 of the 8 Arctic powers belong to NATO, and the opening sea lanes raise fears of increased Russian and Chinese activity. We have to work together to keep the Arctic safe, Rutte warned.
And let me first of all stress that all allies agree on the importance of the Arctic and Arctic security, because we know that with sea lanes opening up, there is a risk that the Russians and the Chinese will be more active. And currently we are discussing the next step to that, how to make sure that we give practical follow-up on those discussions to make sure that as an alliance we do everything collectively and through our individual allies to make sure that the Arctic stays safe, as we all agree that that has to be a priority.
But Russia sees it differently. As NATO launched Operation Arctic Endurance, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova called it yet another provocation and warned of serious consequences. Moscow, she said, will defend its interests, its sovereignty, and the northern sea route at all costs.
Our country, as the largest Arctic power, closely watches the situation around Greenland. We proceed from the fact that any disagreements around this autonomous, self-governing territory should be resolved through negotiations in accordance with international law, taking into account the interests of the people of this self-governing region. The current tension around the northern Danish autonomy acutely demonstrates the inconsistency of the so-called rule-based world order constructed by the West. Shortcomings of Copenhagen's long-standing policy of unconditional submission to the U.S., its senior ally, are plain to see. We stand in solidarity with China's position on the inacceptability of references to any activities of Russia and China around Greenland as reasons for the current exacerbation. Before blaming others for disagreements among themselves, NATO members and Euro bureaucrats should first more clearly realize their own responsibility for the deep and rapid erosion of the international legal foundations of global security architecture. The presence of the North Atlantic Bloc is evidently a destabilizing factor in the military-political atmosphere in the region. Planning to follow the path of Arctic militarization, European capitals should understand that their attempts to escalate the situation in high latitudes and create security threats to a full Arctic community member, of course I am talking about Russia, will have the most severe consequences for them. Trump, under the pretext of ensuring security from China and Russia, announced intentions to establish control over Greenland, considering it a strategic resource of the United States. How does Russia's foreign ministry assess Washington's claims to this territory? Neither Russia nor China has announced any such plans. There is no factual information that could confirm such accusations in any way. That's the first point. Meanwhile, both Russia and, by the way, recently China, say they want to develop relations with this region of the world. For our country, this is natural. Interaction and cooperation are given to us by nature. We are part of the Arctic region ourselves.
Meanwhile, Norway has revealed Russia is reinforcing Arctic bases with nuclear weapons on the Kola Peninsula, aimed not just at Norway, but across the pole toward Canada, the UK, and the United States. Hypersonic missiles, nuclear torpedoes, submarines slipping through critical choke points. In the icy silence of the Arctic, a new confrontation is taking shape, And as Trump pushes, NATO divides, and Russia fortifies, the world is watching to see which trajectory this extraordinary crisis will take.